This is the third in my series From Portraits to Puddles, New York City Memorials, from the Civil War to the World Trade Center Memorial. A bit of background. We've seen memorials from the Civil War in the 1860s and the Spanish-American War, the Dewey Arch. Nearly all the memorials erected in New York for those wars honored specific leaders, although St. Gaudens's magnificent Sherman is a combination of a portrait with an allegorical figure. A few sculptures, such as John Quincy Adams Ward's 7th Regiment Memorial in Central Park and the Civil War Soldiers Monument in the Greenwood Cemetery, represent soldiers who are low-ranking but nevertheless proud and dignified. The next conflict in which Americans fought was World War I. The Great War lasted from 1914 to 1918. Some 20 million people worldwide were killed in combat or died of disease. American troops fought from 1917 to 1918. Of the 4 million Americans sent to fight, 116,000 died. It was a horrendously traumatic conflict. Manhattan has 6 memorials to those who died in World War I. These two, on the left, are by Philip Martini, who 15 years earlier had sculpted the allegorical groups that stand in front of Surrogate's Court on Chambers Street, New York in infancy and New York during Revolutionary times. If you think something radical is happening in the art world of the early 20th century, to go from these two to that one, you are correct, but that's a theory, a story for another time. 2 more memorials to World War I show groups of soldiers that include wounded men. And the last 2 honor a priest and a poet. Flanders Fields by Canadian John Mccrae was the most famous poem written about the war and one of the most moving. The last few verses are inscribed on the sculpture's pedestal. This is the complete poem. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields. The second sculpture on this slide is Father Duffy, a Catholic priest who was chaplain to the Fighting 69th, a regiment that lost all but 600 of its 3,500 members in barely a year. None of Manhattan's 6 memorials to the First World War stands in Battery Park, but Battery Park does have the Coast Guard Memorial, which has the same spirit as many World War I memorials. In this memorial, 3 over life-size figures stand on a pedestal 4 or 5 feet high. The center figure's head is drooping, and his arms are draped over his comrade's shoulders. Clearly he's been wounded. This sculpture has been in storage since at least 2012 due to subway construction through the park, but someday it will come back. Meanwhile, lesson number 3. I noted when talking about Erickson that the point of a memorial isn't to teach us about a person's life or a historical event, but to remind us of what we know, to call to mind an admirable person whose life is worth remembering and celebrating. The Coast Guard Memorial doesn't teach us about the Coast Guard. It reminds us of a certain type of person who presumably thrives in the Coast Guard. His work is dangerous, but he does it anyway. And if he's wounded or exhausted, he has brave comrades who will help him survive.